Throughout the 11 seasons of The Walking Dead, we meet some less than savoury characters, so today I thought we'd go through all 11 seasons of the show and say who is the most evil character from each and every season. Now, just before we get into the list, I'd like to say we're ranking characters based on their actions in that specific season, so no prior or past activities. So, for example, Season 3 Merle can't have his actions from Season 1 held accountable to him in Season 3. Okay, with that all cleared up, let's get straight into the video. Season 1 is arguably the tamest season in the entire show, as we only have to deal with racism, domestic abuse, and inappropriate conduct towards women, so just the minor crimes then. Kicking it all off, we have Ed Peltier, married to Carol and the father of Sophia. He's physically and emotionally abusive to not just his wife, but also his daughter. And this character is all round just a pretty awful dude, as we see him hit Carol multiple times throughout Season 1 and hear dialogue of how he's abusive to Sophia. Shane is also a contender here, although getting with your best friend's wife is pretty dodgy and probably makes you a bad person on paper. Not only did they think Rick was dead, but I also wouldn't go as far as to say it makes you an evil person. However, Shane makes a last-ditch attempt to try and win this award by making an unwanted and forceful advance onto Laurie in the episode TS19. But again, I think Shane misses out on this top spot, and I'd probably say Ed is actually worse than him anyway. So, the winner of Most Evil Character in Season 1 is Merle Dixon. Now, obviously, all of the crimes mentioned don't make you a good person whatsoever. However, Merle, unlike the other two, has multiple offences. He's racist, he was a misogynist, probably would have killed T-Dog if it wasn't for Rick and been the first murder in the whole show, and he had also planned to rob the Atlanta group with Daryl. Look, if Rick hadn't have showed up that day, who knows how events would have unfolded. He very well, like I said, could have killed T-Dog and maybe others who tried to stop him on the rooftop that day in Atlanta, and he also would have gone back and robbed a group of struggling survivors with women and children amongst them. I don't care what anyone says, that does not make you a good person. I think for me, this makes Merle the most evil character in Season 1, and although he would go on to change and redeem himself in Season 3, we can't consider that in our decision here. Merle enjoyed causing fear and asserting control, and he lashes out when he doesn't get his way. He was an unpredictable and violent man, and he especially stands out in this season because the world is very much still trying to cling on to its humanity. It was the walkers who were the primary threat in this season, and most of the living people weren't yet monsters. And although that would change as the world fell deeper into decay, Merle is the clear outlier from Season 1, and for those exact reasons, he's the most evil person from it. Season 2 is where we see the stakes ramped up. There's death, betrayal, and more as society continues to fall into disarray. Once again, much of the group's threat come from within, as we focus once again on moral conflicts rather than quote-unquote villains. And the joint winners of this season would have probably been Dave and Tony, had we learnt to the full extent of their crimes. We meet this pair in Season 2 Episode 8 titled Nebraska, and thanks to dialogue from Randall, we know they were part of a larger group, one in which murder, and we will say for the sake of monetization on this video, inappropriate behaviour towards women occurred. Now, this would definitely make these two the #1 spot for most evil characters for Season 2, but not only do we not see any of this on screen, but this information only comes from a single remark made by Randall as he pleads for his life. So although it's likely to be true, it also could have been made up in the spur of the moment to try and prove that he wouldn't go back to these people and stay with our group on the farm. Either way, there's just flat out not enough information on these two, so I can't really crown either of them most evil person of Season 2. So kind of, again, by default, the most evil person of Season 2 is Shane Walsh. Now again, I actually wouldn't really call Shane evil. Yes, he's a bad person who's delusional and ruthless, but calling him evil is a bit of a stretch. Shane does, however, give us our first murder or manslaughter, depending on where you lie with the whole Otis situation. The debate of whether he could have escaped without killing him is older than time, but the stone cold fact is he did kill another human being in Otis. He lies and manipulates to the group in an attempt to regain control, and he kills Randall, and then of course attempts to kill Rick, by leading him out in the dead of night under the false pretense of Randall's escape. Shane is a cautionary tale of jealousy, pride, and delusion, and his and Rick's relationship is a highlight of the first 2 seasons for me. And up until this point, our group's only real concern was that of the Walkers, and although again I wouldn't really call Shane evil, his gradual deterioration would be a sign of things to come. However, due to him being the first and only real protagonist we'd seen so far, other than maybe Merle for an episode I guess in season 1, Shane kind of has to win this award of most evil person in season 2, basically by default. And because I know there will always be a few people in the comments saying Rick had a higher body count than Shane by the end of season 2, let's just be real for a moment. Rick shot Dave and Tony because they drew on him first, and he killed Shane in self-defense. These are 2 very different situations to the way Shane got his kills, and not to mention Shane attempted to flat out murder Rick in cold blood. So now we've cleared that up, let's move on to season 3. Now, season 3, I think a lot of people know what's coming. But that being said, we start to see a shift away from raw survival into themes of power, control, and civilization. Before we get to the obvious winner of this season, there are a few honourable or dishonourable mentions in this case. Again, although Merle Dixon receives his eventual redemption, towards the beginning of the season, he falls right back into that morally grey area. And Thomas the Prisoner is also up there, as not only was he in prison in the first place before the outbreak, suggesting he's not a great person, but we see his ruthless nature as he kills one of his friends Big Tiny without hesitation and also attempts to kill Rick. It's also worth noting he'd only been aware of the apocalypse for a matter of hours and was already displaying an extreme lack of remorse and power control, so he could have easily grown into someone to rival even the winner of this season. But of course, the winner of Season 3's most evil character is Philip Blake. Better known as the Governor, this complete psycho is a worthy winner, as unlike the last 2 seasons, he truly embodies the title of an evil character. The Governor manages to mix his lack of empathy, psychotic nature, bloodlust, and sadistic tendencies in a mask of charisma, charm, and order. He isn't scary because he's huge or amazing at fighting, he's scary because he controls, manipulates, and calculates his every move. The Governor has killed hundreds of people: Milton, Andrea, the small group of military folks, and of course the massacre of his own people after they fled from battle. Along with all the killing, he tortures people and also gets enjoyment out of it. He threatens to abuse Maggie and he rules Woodbury with an iron fist. He is a man who has fully embraced the chaos of this new world in the worst possible way. It's a demonstration of what happens when power goes unchecked, and he truly proved to all of us that the biggest threat in this world was not the walkers, but in fact the remaining survivors. The Governor is well and truly the first out-and-out antagonist in the entire series, and boy does he live up to it. He's arguably the most evil character in the entire show, full stop, so he is an absolute lock for this pick in Season 3. The Governor is one of the greatest villains in fiction and challenges our protagonist Rick in every aspect. Rick is slowly falling apart after Laurie's death, and up until this point he's led through sacrifice and struggle. The Governor, however, despite his loss, is seemingly calm and composed, leading through fear and manipulation, and it causes Rick to question himself and almost give up Michonne in an attempt to save the group, before realising that would make him no better than the man who threatens their survival. There was never going to be anyone who even came close to taking the Governor's crown of the most evil person in Season 3, and it's probably the easiest choice I'll have to make in this video. Now, Season 4 of The Walking Dead is where we start to get feral. After the fall of the prison, the group are split up and forced into some very difficult decisions. Lizzie kills her own sister and attempts to take the life of a baby Judith. However, she was a confused and mentally ill child, so I wouldn't outright call her evil, more like broken. As for some other, well, dishonourable mentions for this season, Claimer Joe is the leader of the Claimers and allows some pretty heinous crimes to happen under his leadership, but more specifically Dan, a member of his group and the one that attempts to force himself upon Carl that night, has to be the worst Claimer, because that is just truly sick, and he well and truly deserved his fate. Now, I was undecided on who to choose for the number 1 spot, because the return of the Governor in the first half of Season 4 means we have 2 heavyweights fighting it out in Dan and Philip Blake. But we don't actually know that much about Dan other than him being a pedo and a complete scumbag. Although I think that crime is worse than whatever the governor commits as an individual crime, it's the sheer volume of crimes that the governor does commit in this season that wins him the title of the most evil character in season 4 for me. At the beginning of the season, we see a seemingly broken man wandering alone, and it's this appearance of psychological collapse that made the governor seem like someone who'd hit rock bottom and was trying to start a new life. He then meets Tara, Lily and Megan, and they reignite his purpose once again, with Megan reminding him a lot of his now deceased daughter. He very quickly earns their trust, and after leaving the flat they were holding up in, they join another camp where he comes across Martinez, one of his former soldiers. And for a while, it seems to go alright. He joins the camp, the group settle in nicely, and the governor has seemingly changed. However, one night, he snaps. He brutally kills Martinez. He suggests whilst out on a supply run they kill and rob people. He also kills the level-headed Pete and then brainwashes his newfound community to attack the prison, convincing them that they are bad people. Now, not only did he get around 30 people killed, he was acting out of his own selfish desires for revenge, and this ultimately led to his demise. He killed the harmless and reasonable Herschel for absolutely no reason other than to inflict pain onto our survivors, and it showed us all he hadn't changed one bit. His redemption arc was all an illusion. It was a performance, and when it was over, the true monster returned once again. However, this time, he was more dangerous than ever. So, for the sheer amount of lives he took, the ruthless measures he saw suitable for survival, and his endless lust for power, the governor is once again the most evil character from season 4. But don't worry, Claimer Dan is definitely up there, and had we seen any more from him, he could have very easily taken this top spot. Season 5 gives us a whole array of evilness, from cannibalism to domestic abuse. It really has it all. Our first dishonourable mention is of course Martin from Terminus, a sadistic cannibal who admits to murder with no empathy, threatens a full-on baby in Judith, and is overall just a pretty awful human. Officer Gorman of Grady Memorial Hospital is another dishonourable mention. He uses his power to abuse women, and is overall just a creepy, violent perv. And also Pete Anderson of the fairly civilised Alexandria is also worth a mention for abusing his wife Jessie and hitting his 2 kids. But the most evil character in season 5 has to be either Gareth, the leader of the termites, or this unnamed crazy man I'm putting on screen. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to give the edge to the unnamed crazy man we see in just a singular episode of season 5. But I will get onto him in a bit. Both men are ruthless cannibals who lure people in under the false pretense of protection. These cannibals' slaughterhouse does not discriminate, as we see from the belongings they have killed both children, women and men. Obviously Gareth is well known, he's the main antagonist of the first portion of season 5, and he meets a very satisfying end at the hands of Rick Grimes, who fulfills his promise by murdering him with a red machete. But as we find out in the season 5 premiere, titled No Sanctuary, Terminus was once just as it claimed, an actual sanctuary for survivors. However, this unnamed man and his group took it over, imprisoning its inhabitants, abusing the woman. Once again, I can't say the actual word of what they did to them, but I think you get the idea, and they tortured the men, as well as being cannibals. So the reason he beats out Gareth is for the added abuse and torture, as he not only did this because he was completely insane and enjoyed tormenting people, but he also turned Gareth and the others into the monsters we would go on to see in the show. And yes, although Gareth eating Bob's leg right in front of him was pretty brutal, at least most of the kills the termites did were quick and efficient, I guess. This unnamed man would literally torture people before killing them just for the love of the game, which added in with his other crimes, which again I can't really mention in this video, means for me he edges out Gareth as the most evil person in season 5. So for the first and only time in this list, I have no idea of the name of the character that wins it, but congratulations to this crazy man, I guess. Now before we move on, I quickly like to say that this scenario is slightly different to the Dave and Tony one from season 2, as not only do we hear it in dialogue from both Gareth and Mary throughout season 5, but we also see physical proof in flashbacks during the episode No Sanctuary. Now, Season 6 of The Walking Dead sees the build up to the infamous all-out war arc, where, spoiler alert, it ramps up tenfold. But as for Season 6, the Wolves as a group are a good shout for this spot. A sadistic group who carve the letter W into people's foreheads, they slaughter people with no clear motive, and their only goal is to seemingly kill people. However, their leader does get a small form of redemption, so I think we need to look elsewhere. Now look, hear me out, I don't think Rick's evil at all, but his decision to slaughter a base full of saviours could put him in contention for just this season. Look, albeit he's nowhere near as bad as the Wolves or some others I'm going to mention in a minute, but I thought Rick is definitely worth a mention. And then there's Paula, the saviour member who sees killing as a transaction. She shows no empathy to the pregnant Maggie and opens Carol's eyes as to what she could become if they completely surrender to violence. But the winner of Season 6 most evil character is Crichton Dallas Wilton. Now look, I said no more nameless characters, I didn't specify faceless. We never actually meet this monster in the show, but we do hear about him in Season 6 Episode 4 titled Here's Not Here, where Eastman tells Morgan the story of how there was once a man in prison. He was a charming and model prisoner who had a strong desire to be freed. And he did put up a strong facade as a good person in order to achieve this goal, but Eastman, a parole officer at the time, denied him this early release, seeing right through his act, recognising him as a truly evil man. One night though, this man, who is revealed to be called Crichton Dallas Wilton, managed to break out of prison, but not to escape. He did so to destroy Eastman's life. He proceeds to go to Eastman's house, slaughter his wife, son and daughter, and then walk to the police station down the road covered in their blood to turn himself in. I mean, if that doesn't scream evil to you, then there's something wrong. And the fact Eastman starved him to death, and it was probably still a far too humane way for him to go out, speaks volumes of who he is as a person. This is a dangerous killer with a charismatic and charming side, allowing him to manipulate others just like the governor does. But the fact he killed an innocent family just to ruin someone else's life shows you just how sick he is. To add on top of all of this, he did this pre-apocalypse, meaning he wasn't mentally exhausted or driven insane by the loss of his loved ones. He was born this way, making him probably the most evil person in the entire show. And like I said earlier, we never physically meet this man in the show, but best believe he would be 10 times worse in the setting of an apocalypse. With no rules, no repercussions, and no jail time, who knows how bad Crichton could have been. And unlike others on this list who ascend into darkness over time due to their environments, Crichton was always born evil. Look, Season 7 can only really be won by a singular person, and I think you all know what's coming, but let's give some quick mentions to other characters. Dwight, although he's being controlled by Negan, almost takes enjoyment in torturing Daryl, a man that once helped you, and is overall just not a very nice person in Season 7. David, the saviour, attempts to assault Sasha after her abduction to the sanctuary, and is all round just a repulsive human being. And of course, Simon, Negan's second-hand man, is a right piece of work. But of course, for the events of just Season 7, it has to be Negan, purely for the amount of atrocities he committed in this season. He was on a full rampage. He kills Glenn, Abraham, enslaves communities, forces women to be his wives, he tortures his foes, and he rules with an iron fist, all while seemingly enjoying it. The worst part about Negan is he was likeable and hilarious while also being this heinous villain. His introduction shattered the power balance of the series and created this almost untouchable presence. And for the first time in the entire show, Rick's group felt truly trapped. And Negan had them right where he wanted them at all times throughout the course of Season 7. Look, I know Negan would go on to have a dramatic redemption arc in the later seasons, but for this season he was a complete monster, and I'm sure AMC would do anything in its power to take back the fact he used to force women to be his wives. Negan's effectiveness as a villain lies not just in his brutality, but in his psychological warfare, and the systematic nature of his oppression. He was a tyrant in every aspect, and the writers had to make him evil for this season, because what good is it having a big bad villain who's not scary or very evil? And although he does mellow out in the later seasons of the show, he was a complete menace in Season 7, so for that reason, Negan is the most evil character from Season 7. Season 8 is where we see our group fight back against Negan's oppression, causing an all-out war, and this war is a complete bloodbath for both sides. Jared is a solid pick for Season 8, not only was he the most annoying character ever, but he kills a young Benjamin for seemingly no reason, and then continues to mock his 11-year-old brother. Like, what an asshole. And once again is fitting of a horrible death. And Negan takes a rather large step back in this season. Him and Rick do some questionable things, but Negan actually only kills a single human being in Season 8, that being Simon, which is actually a good thing. So he is basically an angel in apocalyptic terms. In fact, Rick is actually worse than Negan in Season 8, killing a bunch of saviors who he'd given his word to after they freed him and Morgan out of danger. But the worst character in Season 8, and no one really comes close, is Simon. Look, this guy is sick. A man who is at home in this chaotic and ruthless world. He slaughters the scavengers, goes against Negan's command, we find out he is the one who ordered the massacre of Oceanside, and he tries to completely annihilate Hilltop and other communities. He just has zero regard for human life, he is a mass psycho murderer, and he wasn't even a good man pre-apocalypse. Before all the chaos, Simon was a subprime mortgage letter who trapped vulnerable customers in bad contracts, extracting money out of them, and if they didn't pay, he would resort to violence. Meaning, even before the apocalypse, he was a pretty nasty dude. Simon is a terrifying villain because he doesn't believe in order or second chances. He's the type of person who enjoys being the last face someone sees in their life, and in a world full of broken morals, Simon isn't just a bad man trying to survive, he's a full-on monster who has literally committed genocide. So for these reasons, Simon is the most evil character from Season 8. Season 9 of The Walking Dead sees a complete shift in tone, transitioning from a war against the Saviors to themes of growth and civilization. But of course, we meet a whole new type of threat in this season, named the Whisperers. But before getting into the winner, Jed, Justin and Gregory are all pretty awful people. Justin is an undermining saviour, unwilling to change and help, Gregory is just constantly lying and scheming about taking over Hilltop, and Jed is just an awful human full stop. But like many of you probably predicted, this season comes down to two pretty heinous characters, those being Beta and Alpha of the Whisperers. Now, I'm going to put Beta second because although he shows no empathy, kills without remorse, and allows atrocities to happen in the Whisperer camp, he is ultimately just following commands from Alpha, which I think make her the worst character. Alpha leads the Whisperers, a group that survives by living among the walkers, wearing their skins and rejecting all forms of civilization. She murdered her own father pre-apocalypse at the age of 9, and was physically and mentally abusive to her only daughter Lydia. During the outset of the virus, we learn she murders her own husband after a disagreement of where to take Lydia, and Alpha's crimes consist of abducting a group of 10 members, beheading them all, including her daughter's boyfriend, and presenting them on pikes, allowing heinous acts of abuse to happen in the Whisperer camp that go unpunished, multiple murders, and physical and mental abuse towards children, and that's just the start of it. Alpha is up there for one of the most evil characters in the show full stop. And Season 9 is where she is at her most evil. This monster essentially leads a cult of crazy people who hunt and kill anyone just because they can, and we see this portrayed to us firsthand in the constant pursuit of Rosita and Eugene. The Whisperers are not a nice group, and the person who orchestrates all of this is Alpha. Unlike past antagonists from the show who fought to control resources or impose order, Alpha and the Whisperers embrace the collapse of society. They do not seek to rebuild it, they thrive in its destruction, and a lawless and chaotic world is where Alpha and the Whisperers feel at home. So for all of these reasons, she is the most evil character in Season 9. Now, Season 10, we see the continued conflict of the Whisperer War. Again, Beta, much for the reasons he was a dishonourable mention in the last season, makes this list once more, and Alpha just about misses out on the top spot because actually most of her evil is done in Season 9. In Season 10 she only really commands waves of walkers to try and take out Alexandria, which albeit is pretty bad, but I do believe there is someone worse than her, and that person is Dante. Albeit once again under the orders of Alpha, Dante enters Alexandria under the disguise of a helpful if slightly abrasive medic. He builds a strong relationship with residents, even developing a friendship with Sadiq, who is suffering from severe PTSD after the Pike deaths from the previous season. Dante jokes, comforts and offers medical care, all while secretly working to destroy the community from the inside. This intimate betrayal makes Dante just as disturbing than the overtly violent villains that came before him. He smiles while plotting sabotage, he kills with kindness on his face, and unlike villains like Alpha or Simon, Dante's evil is camouflaged in normalcy. And that makes the character absolutely terrifying. He manipulates Sadiq's PTSD, uses it against him, and then kills him in the most brutal way. He pollutes the Alexandrians' water supply and wages biological warfare against the communities. Look, Alpha did ask Dante to be an inside agent, but Dante off his own back chooses to haunt Sadiq, then brutally kill him. He chooses to smile and laugh whilst killing citizens, and the point is, he enjoys doing it. So yes, he might have been given these orders, but he is just as evil, make no mistake, as he goes above and beyond. Dante may not be this big scary villain, but his emotional cruelty and manipulation make him a psychotic killer who plays on people's weaknesses, all whilst getting a kick from it. And based off the events solely from Season 10, I think he's probably worse than Alpha, so for those reasons Dante is my pick for Season 10. Season 11 is the final one in The Walking Dead, and we see two antagonist groups here. Firstly, the Reapers over the first half of the season, and then secondly, the Commonwealth. Whilst characters like Sebastian Milton and his mother Pamela are very annoying, I wouldn't really class them as evil. Leia and Carver could be considered due to their acts, but I think there's two people far worse than them. Firstly, Lance Hornsby. This slimy politician is untrustworthy and willing to do anything to get his way. We see him attempt to slaughter a whole community, hunt down our group and dethrone Pamela. He is a power-hungry psychopath, but is just pipped to the top spot by the leader of the Reapers named Pope. The nature of evil evolves massively throughout the show's runtime, from chaotic violence to systematic corruption, and whilst characters like Lance and Leia pose threats to our group, it's Pope who in my opinion is the worst. Pope's villainy is rooted in religious extremism and militaristic dominance. As the leader of the Reapers, a group of ex-soldiers turned mercenaries, Pope adopts a twisted belief that his survival and his actions are justified by divine will. He sees the apocalypse as a spiritual cleansing, and he views his enemies not as fellow survivors, but as sinners unworthy of mercy. He hunts down anybody still alive to try and kill them, and his beliefs allow him to rationalise every heinous decision he makes. Unlike other villains who kill for power, resources or revenge, Pope believes he is carrying out God's will. This makes him terrifyingly unpredictable and utterly uncompromising. He tortures people, he kills women and children, and he takes communities away. I mean, he literally kills one of his own men to make a point about loyalty. The man is a complete psycho. And mix all of this in with the fact he's ex-military and has a team of highly trained soldiers on his side, and what you get is a lunatic who will kill absolutely anything in his path, and for that reason I think Pope is the most evil character from Season 11. But with that being said, let me know down below in the comments if you agree with my picks. There are a plethora of villains throughout The Walking Dead, so I'm sure some of you feel very differently. And if you enjoyed today's video, please do like and subscribe as it helps the channel out massively. And we are also well on the road to 15,000 subscribers. You can also join my Discord server to talk all things Walking Dead. The link will be the pinned comment on this video. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.